In less than 50 years, a deeply isolated, feudal society of samurai turned itself into an industrial superpower capable of defeating European empires. To understand how this happened, we have to look at where Japan started. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan enjoyed 2 centuries of relative peace. But it achieved that peace by locking itself into a strict class system where samurai sat at the top and social mobility was non-existent. During this era, East Asia was heavily dominated by China, which sat comfortably at the center of a massive system of tributary states. Japan, meanwhile, kept its borders entirely shut off from the rest of the world. While this deep isolation guaranteed internal stability, it also meant Japan was completely shielded from the Industrial Revolution tearing through the rest of the globe. That shield shattered in the mid-19th century. The United States arrived on Japan's shores with modern, heavily armed warships and used the threat of sheer force to make them open their borders to foreign trade. The sudden appearance of these advanced ships terrified Japan's leaders. They looked outward and saw massive European empires aggressively expanding, swallowing up neighboring territories closer and closer to their own island. The leadership realized they had exactly 2 options. They could keep their ancient feudal system and inevitably be conquered, or they could rapidly modernize their entire society to fight back. Absolute existential terror of becoming imperial prey dictated every stage of the overhaul that followed. This brings us to the Meiji Restoration. The government initiated a radical dismantling of the old feudal order. They began building a centralized state, replacing traditional samurai armor with uniforms modeled directly on Western militaries, and developing a modern command structure. You might know this specific era from Hollywood movies like The Last Samurai. Those stories paint a highly romanticized picture, suggesting that noble warriors fought a tragic battle to protect pure, spiritual traditions against corrupting foreign influence. But the historical record shows something else entirely. The samurai rebellions that broke out during this period were essentially desperate economic and political conflicts. The samurai class was losing its exclusive political privileges and its government stipends, and they were fighting to maintain their wealth, not their spiritual purity. Modernizing a nation is a harsh political realignment. To build a stronger, centralized state, the new government ruthlessly stripped the old elite of their remaining influence and capital. But overhauling the political class was only half the problem. Japan needed a massive industrial base capable of manufacturing weapons, and waiting for a pure, free market to develop naturally would take far too long. So they developed Japanese-style state capitalism. The central government directly partnered with massive family-owned conglomerates, funneling heavy resources into these monopolies. Directing them from the top down artificially sped up development, laying down national railways and shipping lines almost overnight. The result was an explosion of domestic manufacturing, instantly shifting a vast portion of the peasant population into heavy industrial labor inside massive new factories. Through sheer state-directed force, an isolated, underdeveloped island managed to condense centuries of organic economic progress into just a few decades. But this rapid success brought a dark geopolitical realization. The leadership concluded that the only way to guarantee Japan wouldn't be colonized was to project military dominance outward and become an empire themselves. In 1894, they put their new society to the ultimate test. They deployed their completely modernized army in the First Sino-Japanese War, directly challenging China. The Japanese military was completely victorious, and in a matter of months, the centuries-old balance of power in East Asia violently shifted away from China and toward Japan. They used this newfound military advantage to violently expand, subjugating neighboring nations like Korea. They justified this extreme cruelty by arguing that their successful modernization made them a superior nation with a right to extract resources from those they deemed inferior. The desperate quest to survive as prey ended with Japan becoming a relentless imperial predator. Japan's aggressive imperial expansion led to the collapse of its military empire in the 20th century. However, while the army was dismantled, the underlying economic engine, the state-directed partnership with massive corporate structures, remained intact. This 19th century blueprint fueled the economic miracle of the post-war era. By the 1960s, these institutional foundations produced a 10% annual growth rate, making Japan the first nation to leap from poverty to incredible wealth in just decades. The electronics and automotive industries that made modern Japan a global powerhouse were built directly on top of the corporate structures established a century earlier. The modern wealth of Japan was no accident. It was a permanent blueprint forged in the desperate fires of 19th century geopolitical terror.